The Albanese government has become the joke of the internet, with businesses, large and small, lashing out against its changes to capital gains tax. The Prime Minister can't explain why he's chosen to tax hard-working Australians, the vets, the cafe owners, the small business builders who have risked everything, worked tirelessly in their own time to create a self-sufficient enterprise of their own. Albanese doesn't understand the changes or how they'll impact business because he's personally never owned one. He's never spent a day working in a real job in the private sector. His whole life has been student politics and then federal politics. And listen to what he told this finance influencer.
Why were the capital gains tax changes applied to all assets rather than just residential property? Some people feel like it's unfair that it was applied to shares and businesses as well.
No, we wanted to make sure that the drive of investment was towards more productive sides of the economy.
What? It seems the Prime Minister doesn't understand what he's actually doing or why.
A Prime Minister just managed to unite billionaires, single mums, Labor's own backbench and TikTok teenagers against him in one single budget. That's not a coincidence, that's a talent. Let's find out how he pulled it off. Welcome back to Australian Daily Insider. Grab a coffee because we're diving into the budget that's got everyone from boardrooms to group chats absolutely fuming. First, let's talk about what actually happened. The Albanese government dropped changes to capital gains tax and trust taxation, and almost overnight, critics started calling it a death tax. Not exactly the branding you want trending. When your economic policy gets a nickname usually reserved for horror movies, that's not a messaging problem, that's a substance problem.
And Labor is now behind the scenes floating a carve-out for the startup sector. But if they think this is purely a startup issue, they fundamentally misunderstand the business community, because this impacts every single business in the country, as Lachlan Harris points out today. Harris was a senior advisor to Kevin Rudd. He's Labor to his bones. Yet today he took the bold step of speaking publicly, arguing the CGT changes should only apply to property and that other assets, including businesses and shares, should be excluded. He said Labor's budget will make it harder to start businesses, to work in small businesses, and for those businesses to raise money. Here's what he said. This is not just for tech startups in Surrey Hills. This is businesses in Box Hill and Castle Hill. This is not just a problem for Tier 1 AI startups. It's a problem for every single business in the country. And he gave those comments to the Herald.
Now, before you tune out thinking this is boring tax jargon, stick with me because this affects way more people than you'd think. Trusts and capital gains aren't just billionaire toys. Small business owners, family farms, mum and dad investors, they're all sitting in the blast radius. So naturally, the backlash didn't stay quiet. It exploded across social media, rippled through the business community, and here's the kicker. Even people inside Labor started grumbling. When your own team is side-eyeing the play call, you know the game plan needs a rewrite. Let's rewind for a second and talk history, because context is everything here. Keating in the 80s pushed through brutal, unpopular reforms, but they were built on fiscal discipline, designed to make Australia leaner and more competitive on the world stage. Critics are drawing a hard line between that era and now, arguing today's approach isn't reform, it's just squeezing harder in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Think of it like the difference between a personal trainer pushing you to get stronger versus someone just taking your lunch money. One builds something, the other just hurts.
What should have happened in this federal budget is simple. Ministers should have made tough decisions to cut spending across every portfolio. Former Prime Minister and Treasurer Keating has spoken about how exactly he did this in the 80s. He said, with my colleagues Peter Walsh and John Dawkins, and supported in the Expenditure Review Committee by Brian Howe and Ralph Willis, we set about dramatically reducing government spending. It took 4 exhausting years to do, program by program, department by department, while the terms of trade shock followed the fundamental reform of the tax system the previous year, 1985, very large income tax cuts, capital gains, fringe benefits, company tax cuts, imputation, etc. He says the changes set Australia up for 30 years of low inflation growth, the income surge that has since made Australia one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And now the opposite is happening. Taxes are rising, and it risks making Australia one of the worst countries in the world for business. Albanese government ministers should have done the same as Keating's team did back then. They should have significantly cut spending to lower inflation and fuel growth.
And speaking of hurting, small business owners are the ones sounding the loudest alarm. The argument goes like this: rising taxes on capital and trusts don't just hit the wealthy, they hit the incentive to invest, to grow, to hire. Push that too far, and Australia risks sliding down the rankings as one of the worst places in the world to actually run a business. That's not a talking point, that's a competitiveness problem with real jobs attached to it. Now here's where it gets politically juicy. Angus Taylor has been positioning the opposition squarely against these tax changes, and it's working. He's picking up momentum, and there's growing chatter about a potential alliance with One Nation. Two forces that don't always agree, suddenly finding common ground because Labor handed them the perfect shared enemy. Politics really does make strange bedfellows, and nothing brings rivals together faster than a common tax bill they both hate. And then there's the messaging strategy, or lack of one. Instead of leading with policy substance, reports suggest government has been leaning heavily on TikTok to sell this to younger voters, which is a bold choice considering the people most affected by trust and capital gains changes are business owners, not 15-second dance trend viewers. It's like trying to fix a leaking roof by posting about sunny weather. Doesn't matter how good the video looks, the water's still coming through the ceiling. Critics have been blunt about it too, arguing this isn't really a policy strategy at all, it's a vibe strategy. Reform takes explaining, defending, adjusting. Vibes just need a trending sound and a good filter. The problem is, budgets don't get fixed with engagement metrics. So where does that leave things? A government facing pressure from business, backlash from voters doing it tough, murmurs of dissent from its own ranks, and an opposition suddenly looking more united than it has in years. That's not a great scoreboard heading into the next fight. Is this a temporary storm Albanese rides out, or the start of a much bigger problem heading into the next election? That's genuinely up for debate, and I want to hear where you land. Drop your take in the comments, hit subscribe because we're breaking down Australian politics every single day, and I'll catch you in the next one.